Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya and welcome to TFiR. Let's talk. And today we have with us once again our great guest, Andreas Grabner, DevOps Activist at Dynatrace. Andreas, it's great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It seems I must have done something right that you actually invite me back.
No, I loved our last conversation, so I'm excited about today's conversation, which is also exciting because this is your latest report, 2022 State of Site Reliability Engineers Report, which was published this month. Before we deep dive into this report, can you please tell me what is the goal behind this report? What kind of insights you are trying to gain through this?
Yeah, I think what we try to gain is some insights into the challenges that organizations have as they are adapting site reliability engineering, right? The term and the practice and the best practices have been around for many years. Google has made them very famous. Yet we have heard from our community that while they all like the concept, some people really have challenges, and we just wanted to get some numbers around it. This is why this report was really put out, and I think we surveyed 450 SRE practitioners globally, and we really tried to understand is what does SRE really mean for them right now, but what are really their challenges? And because understanding the challenges allows us as an industry to either build better products, better tools that support them in solving these challenges, or maybe we need to educate them better on certain things that are misunderstood.
Now let's just talk about what are some of the highlights. As you talked about, you're trying to gain some insights into the challenges. So let's talk about what do you learn? Anything exciting?
Well, I wanna start with the unexciting things, because there was one thing in there that I almost take as a personal offense, because over the last year or two, I've been trying to do my part to educate the SRE community around the concept of service level objectives, SLOs, really defining them to measure if the services and applications are running as expected. And, I'm not the only one that is educating them. Many organizations, many people have done it. There's also great YouTube channels out there, great educational channels. Yet, 99% of the people we surveyed said they really have a hard time defining good SLOs and communicating the value of SLOs to their organization. And I think this is something, it's kind of like a wake-up call almost, that we need to get better in educating people and also making it easier to define the right SLOs.
Ooh, that's really interesting because we also cover SLOs, and I was assuming that it's very well understood. So it's kind of interesting and exciting. So what else was there?
Yeah, I think maybe to add to this, right? I think it is understood, but it's hard to then put into practice. And I think this is really the big thing that we need to learn. So that means how can we educate people to run, let's say, internal workshops and sit down with the business owners, with the development teams, the DevOps teams, to really establish an SLO practice. And I think this is something I take away from it. One of the immediate takeaways and action items that I do is I have a couple of conference presentations coming up at SRE related conferences and SLO related conferences. And I will talk about my experiences on the challenges I had in the beginning, and then kind of what are some success criteria for really defining SLOs at scale in an organization. So this is one thing, to round up this first question. The second thing, what I thought is really interesting is that we asked, one of the questions was, which of the tasks, or where do SREs in organizations dedicate most of their time? And the number one answer was reducing MTTR. So reducing mean time to respond, mean time to resolution, mean time to repair. And I would have also assumed that we are already much better and not kind of, wasting a lot of manual time in bringing systems back to a healthy state. I thought by 2022, we have built more automation, especially in operations, to bring systems back to a healthy state in a more automated way, and not spending 66% of the time to really reducing MTTR in mostly manual fashion. I think this is also another interesting learning. People, SREs, are trying to automate, and this is also why the second item that they said they're spending 60% of their time to build and maintain automation code, which is on the one side great that the automation code is built because it helps reduce manual effort. On the other side, it also means that we have not yet reached the situation where SREs have established platforms that kind of are built with resiliency in mind, or that are kind of at least resilience by default or resilient by default. And I think this is something that will be the next big thing. SREs should not be the modern IT ops that is using automation to restart servers or restart services. It should be the person that is coaching and mentoring developers, architects, cloud architects, and really telling them how to build resilient software by default, which means that they build in the right observability to tell them whether a system is healthy or unhealthy, but also build in capabilities like handling bad situations by default. So what if a front-end service is losing the connection to the backend service? What are the reconnect strategies? What are the failover strategies? It shouldn't mean that an SRE has to manually go there and restart that service. The front-end service that uses a backend service should be more resilient by default. And I think these are some of the things that I believe will also kind of influence the work of SREs in the future, which in the end will make building automation easier because there's more resiliency in the services by default, which then also automatically reduces errors, which means they have to spend less time in manually bringing system back to a healthy state.
You brought up so many points here that I want to discuss all of them one by one, because some of these findings are kind of surprising to me as well, especially because I cover this area. So let's start with SLO first. As you also said, that almost 99%, they struggle to define and create SLO. And you touched upon that, that you have been doing this whole education, trying to educate people about that. What do you think went wrong that people still don't, are we not, there's two things could be that we are not creating enough messaging, one thing. Second thing is the way we are delivering the message or the way we are packaging it is not efficient. So what do you think? What is the reason?
Now, I think the reason is that we have initially taken everything that Google said, and they talk about the four golden signals, Netflix and Uber and Facebook. They talked about their metrics that they are putting on their services, and I think in the beginning we blindly tried to educate people. Well, all you need to do is you need to define those SLOs: the throughput, the error rate, the availability, the resource consumption on every service, and then you will be like Google. But this doesn't work, and it doesn't scale, and it's also not meaningful because nobody actually knows how these systems should really behave, every single service. I think the mistake that we made is that we have not started on the top, which is the business metric, right? I always think when we talk about SLOs, we need to somehow align it with the top business goals. And I think this is what SREs need to do. They need to not only provide insights into their applications and enable development teams to define and monitor the individual services. They always first have to say, what is the application we are delivering? What is the business value? What's the user journey that our customers or users are going through? Where is the critical path? And then we want to define, if we want to become successful as a business, what does the availability of our key features need to be? What does the performance have to be? Because we know users are not happy if things are slow. And how can we improve reliability? And from that, then we can break it down into the individual backend services that are contributing to that business goal, and then can really define meaningful SLOs. And then everyone can take ownership and say, hey, I might only be responsible for a backend service, but now I know how I'm contributing to the overall goal. And before that, I think this was not the message that we have put out there. We didn't educate people in the right way. And this is also how I run my workshops these days. I first try to find what is the overall business goal of a new app, of a service, and then based on that, break it down into a handful of service level objectives for the backend systems.
Now, let's also talk about SREs, because I hear that you're also trying to define, what is the role of SREs there. So first of all, how do you look at SREs? Depending on who you talk to, some people, they would say, hey, it's a simple evolution of the roles, like from developers to DevOps to how do you look at SREs? What role should they play in organizations?
Yeah. So first of all, this is my opinion, obviously based on I see the world, and I'm very happy to be challenged by you or your listeners. The way I see it is that SREs are using automation to making sure that the business critical services stay in production. And basically what they do, they automate day one and day two operations. So ensuring resiliency and availability of business critical systems once they get deployed into production. In order to do their job well, they need to work very closely with, let's say, the DevOps platform team that is providing automated delivery, which means if an SRE knows that we need a certain availability, we need a certain failover strategy, then they can already talk with the DevOps team to bake things into the delivery pipeline, like automated resiliency testing, whether it's chaos engineering or stuff like that. They can also talk with them and making sure that key metrics, key things that come out of the observability platforms are already early on in the delivery pipeline brought back to the engineers. And even more so, SREs, as I think said earlier, they need to be advocates for the architects of new services so that they are architecting new systems that are resilient by default. Meaning they have to be observable. We have great frameworks right now and great tools that get us observability, but they also need to follow by now well-established practices on how individual services deal with resiliency issues, with connectivity issues, with a high-pressure system on, let's say, workloads or memory or CPU. So I think this is really the role, and many of them I see evolve out of, let's say, what we call maybe former IT operations, where they were responsible for keeping servers up and running, and they had automation scripts to restart services or processes. But now I think the role is going up. They are going up the stack from the hardware all the way up to the application, to the end user, and basically bringing everything to the table that their organization needs to run and operate services in a resilient way.
You also talked about that teams are wasting too much time in doing things manually. We have been talking about automation and AI for a very long time. And once again, it looks like, that's what we have been talking about, is that there's a difference between preaching about things and practicing it. Everybody loves to talk about it, but how many are doing it? So I think this survey, shows us a totally different picture. So talk about, why they are still not leveraging automation and AI capabilities, and how they can use them to enable, SREs as you define, to help businesses grow and become more efficient.
So first of all, I don't want to say they're not building automation, because clearly it says 60% of the time for most SREs is spent in building and maintaining automation code. What I think is happening, and this is also what I hear when I talk with individuals, they are trying to build automation on systems. It's kind of like they're putting a Band-Aid on. There's systems that have not been initially designed to be highly resilient and can withstand the load. And so you are trying to fix things by adding more hardware on the problem, or by trying to build an automation layer around it, like putting Band-Aids on it so that the systems stay reliable. Like the classical example is, right, restarting your app server every day at 1 o'clock in the morning when there's least traffic, because with this you're avoiding a memory leak, but never fixing the memory leak itself. So these are classical things from the past and that are still happening today. So I think they're building automation. What needs to happen is that there is less need for SREs to build this type of Band-Aid automation, but really focus on the automation that is needed in case the systems that need to have more resiliency built in cannot be resilient anymore. So here I'm talking about things like if a faulty version of a software gets deployed, maybe in a canary deployment, then SREs should put in everything in place that automatically things can be rolled back, or maybe the traffic can be redirected to a service that is under less pressure than other services that are currently slowing down people. So I think this is kind of the change that I see, and it's just building the automation up front, building the automation or building the foundation that enables smart automation earlier into the architecture, and then you can also better use your observability platforms, your AI ops platforms that then detect problems on systems that cannot heal themselves, and then trigger the right automation that SREs provide to bring the system back to a healthy state.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that once again. One thing more I want to ask you is, looking at this report or survey, is that how much of do you think is still to do with culture and people processes versus, because technological solutions are there, but when we look at these, it seems more or less like these things are not been fully embraced or adopted in practice.
I think actually one of the quotes, and it actually comes from one of my dear friends from New Zealand. He actually said, SRE is a culture change, and I'm quoting him now, it's also in the report. SRE is a culture change, which is ultimately about operating software systems better. And I think you're right? That's part of it, but it should not be the only excuse. That, we cannot all blame everything on culture, but it definitely is a fundamental thing.
One more thing, which is especially given this geopolitical situation where we are, embracing ourselves for more cyber attack, security is once again becoming a topic of discussion. So, any findings in terms of security as well? Because sometimes when we look at SREs, security also seems to be kind of part of their roles and responsibilities.
Yeah. So first of all, I think security is everybody's business. So we shouldn't, again, just push it to one team. But based on the survey, 68% of the SREs that were surveyed, so 68%, are expecting the role to expand into security. That means resiliency does not only mean is it available, is it up and running, but also is it running securely? Nobody can compromise it in whatever way, right? Compromisation could be a denial of service attack. This becomes then resiliency, but it could also be really compromised and using attack vectors like we've all still have it on our minds, Log4j that happened in December last year. So these are things that SREs need to build these practices around the security checks into their practices. Yeah.
Is this going to be kind of a yearly report? And or you will be, depending on where the market goes, it could be more frequent. What are the things that, first of all, you will be looking at in the next report that you'll be working on? And what kind of things you expect will change by then? I hope that by the next report, we will not be talking about that hey, people still don't know what SLOs are or how to, bring them in practice. So talk about that.
Yes, I truly hope we do this as an annual report. This is the first one we do, and we want to see then the impact we as an industry have on SREs globally. What I would like to see, besides SLOs not being the 99% answer that people don't understand, I would very much so like to see that SREs are spending less time in automating things that don't necessarily should be automated or doing smarter automation. I think coming back to what I said earlier, if you're shifting left resiliency, maybe this is a new term we coin, shift left resiliency means encouraging and helping engineering teams to build resilient systems by default, which means less problems in production later on, less time spent on fixing problems. And if you do it right, SREs can build better automation, smarter automation that leverages observability and AIOps to really bring systems back to a healthy state in a more automated way.
Andreas, thank you so much for taking time out today and share not only some of the findings from the report, but also sharing some of the insights and some of the things that we took for granted or assumed, hey, everybody understood that. So thanks for bringing those out, which also means that we have to also improve in kind of put more efforts into education about SLOs and SREs. So thanks for that. And as usual, I would love to have you back on the show. Maybe we should do something just to carry on this campaign about educating people about SLOs and SREs. So I would love to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I will take you up on that offer.